Welcome everyone to Council 6, which encompasses Monmouth and Ocean County. Welcome everyone to our fall forum. We are going to start off this evening with Jill Hoegel, our first speaker, who is the Director of Investigations and Monitoring at Disability Rights New Jersey, DRNJ, formerly known as Protection and Advocacy. The chat will be disabled. Please use the question and answer box to type questions to Jill, and we will address those. Jill will address those questions and answer as many as she can at the end of her presentation. Everyone will be muted during the presentation, except for Jill, obviously. And we are all looking forward to hearing you tonight, Jill. So please go right ahead.
Right, thank you. I'm very happy that I could be here. I know we had some scheduling snafus at first, but I'm so glad that this worked out. So I am going to share my screen. Hopefully worked in practice. Hopefully it's working now. Yes, everyone can see. Yes. Oh, everybody's muted, so nobody's answering me. Okay. Great. So again, so I'm presenting from Disability Rights New Jersey. And as Ann said, we are formerly New Jersey Protection and Advocacy, if anybody knows us by that name. We changed to Disability Rights in the 2000s, and that was really just to reflect across the country, the protection and advocacy agencies wanted to reflect more that we were about the rights and advancing rights, and the name, you know, all of the other states kind of started changing their names to Disability Rights. New Mexico, Disability Rights, Arizona, there's protection and advocacy in every state. So we changed to Disability Rights New Jersey right around that time. But we are still the Protection and Advocacy Agency, and I'm going to talk about what that means. I am Jill Hoegel. As Ann said, I'm the Director of Investigations and Monitoring, but I have been with Disability Rights New Jersey for almost 20 years now. Started as a staff advocate working specifically in our unit that served individuals with developmental disabilities. And then I became a manager of that unit. And I was a manager of the community inclusion unit, and I've held several different titles throughout my time at Disability Rights, but I have been there for a long time and seen a lot. So my presentation today is just going to talk about what is a protection and advocacy agency, what we do, our areas of focus at Disability Rights, and some of our, I'll go through what our goals and priorities are and how they sort of translate into the work that we do. So as I said, we're the designated protection and advocacy agency. Our mission is to advocate, advance the human, civil, and legal rights of residents of New Jersey with disabilities. How did we come to be? So in the early 70s, Geraldo Rivera, many of you may know this, did an expose on a state school in New York called Willowbrook. And it was a school, and I use that term very loosely, that housed individuals with developmental disabilities. And his expose was, you know, shown on television across the nation, sparked outrage at the conditions in this facility and the conditions that individuals were living in. So as a result, Congress took action, and they enacted the Developmental Disability Assistance and Bill of Rights Act, which we call the DD Act. So what the DD Act did was a couple of things. It created the protection and advocacy system. That is what we are, and that is one in every state in our country. So every state has an agency that is mandated to act as the protection and advocacy agency. And as such, we have very broad authorities and very, very specific mandates, which I'm going to get into. The other things that the DD Act did was create also our DD Act partners. We call them the DD Act partners. So the Council on Developmental Disabilities came out of the DD Act, and they are one of our DD Act partners. The Boggs Center, which is the University Center for Excellence, came out of the DD Act. So you'll often hear perhaps people refer to the DD Act partners. That would be us as the Protection and Advocacy, the Boggs Center, and the Council on Developmental Disabilities. So we really, as the Protection and Advocacy, have two main functions. One, protection. Under that protection piece, as I said, our broad authorities and our mandates, we have a mandate to investigate allegations of abuse and neglect. And we also have authority to monitor, which means just go into and be on site in any settings where people with disabilities live, work, or receive services. You know, here it says where individuals with developmental disabilities live, and because that was the original mandate out of the DD Act. But since then, we've expanded quite a bit and serve beyond just individuals with developmental disabilities. The second part of our mandate is advocacy. So that's really the legal piece of what we do. So, you know, the investigations and monitoring, the protection piece is really what I oversee, the monitoring and the investigations, and then the advocacy comes from our legal issue teams and our attorneys. And that's where we do advice and counsel. That's where we do brief services for individuals. That's where we do self-advocacy assistance, and where we do all the way up to full scope legal representation and represent individuals in hearings or other legal matters where necessary. So as I said, when we expanded beyond the DD Act, Congress started enacting protection and advocacy programs that covered all sorts of different populations and different issues. So as you'll see in '84, a program was enacted to help individuals who are involved with the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Services. That is our CAP program, which is our Client Assistance Program. It does work specific to that, individuals who are trying to get into the workforce. We have a program that serves individuals with mental illness, a specific program that serves individuals with traumatic brain injury, individuals who receive Social Security benefits and want to return to work. And then we have a PAIR program, which basically covers anyone else who has a disability that doesn't fall into any of these other categories. And then the most recent programs were for voting access, where we do a lot of education, run a voter hotline I'll talk a little more about, an assistive technology advocacy program. And then the most recent was just several years ago, Social Security contracts with all of the protection and advocacy agencies who have a representative payee review program. And so those programs are specifically contracted with the Social Security Administration to do reviews, generally of provider agencies, large provider agencies, maybe hospitals or centers, or even smaller provider agencies who act as representative payees for an individual's Social Security benefits. So the purpose of that is to make sure that whoever it is that's acting as the representative payee is using those funds appropriately and for the benefit of the individual. So I have just the one slide for our goals and priorities. I'm probably going to stick on this for a little while as I go through each one of these. I'm using this because currently these are our goals. I'm going to just say goals. I'm going to stop using the word priorities. And you'll see probably by next year, I think we're hoping to have it enacted, a very, very different system of outlining what we're going to now call our goals and objectives. Our funders use the word priorities. We, for as long as I've been here, have used the word priorities because that's what, you know, our funders use. But really, when we say something's a priority, we're saying something else isn't a priority. And that really just kind of doesn't jive with what we want to present. I mean, really, everything's a priority. Everything's a priority to us. Everything's a priority to you. What we want to do is really make it clearer to the public what our objectives are. So our goals are these big things, exactly what you see here. We have a goal to stop, prevent, reduce abuse and neglect in all settings where people with disabilities live, work, or get services. We have a goal to stop discrimination in employment, in housing, in public accommodations. We have a goal that everybody who needs community-based services can access the community-based services that they need. Our healthcare and decision-making, that individuals can access healthcare services and self-determination in their decision-making. Children, that's a really, really broad goal. So we have lots and lots of sort of subcategories under children. So one of our subcategories right now under children is our juvenile justice project. So we have a team of attorneys that work and represent children who are in the juvenile justice system and in that sort of school to prison pipeline to try to disrupt that. Children who've been removed from school or need educational services. Also underneath that, as I said, the educational services, but then also the home and community-based services for children. And I'm probably missing something else there, but someone will ask me and I'll get back to it, I'm sure. Our assistive technology goal, really it's just to ensure that individuals with disabilities who need assistive technology to work or to live successfully in the community can access that. We have also our Assistive Technology Advocacy Center. You may have seen webinars, ATAC or ATAC program. They do a lot of webinars. They do a lot of education, outreach. They do device demonstrations and really do a lot of work with individuals, trying to give them resources to access assistive technology that they may need or to help improve their lives. We have a goal around employment currently, and I mentioned, discrimination in employment kind of falls under our discrimination, but under our employment goal, there's several things we focus on, which is the implementation of New Jersey's Employment First Act, just making sure that individuals who want to work in competitive integrated employment can access all the resources and access all the services that they need in order to try to achieve that goal or work towards that goal. We do a limited number of advocacy for individuals around work-related overpayments. And then recently this year, we've had a focus area around transition. So that kind of falls, that was the thing I was forgetting in children, because it kind of falls in children and in employment, because it's really about those transition age children, making sure that they are getting all the appropriate services and supports needed to make that shift from the children's system to the adult system. And then our outreach and training goal and priority is really this. It's this kind of thing. We go out, we do webinars, we do resource fairs, any kind of outreach where we can spread the word about our services. We will do that. Any kind of education, if someone or a group would like some training on a very specific topic, like Medicaid eligibility or supported decision-making, or any area where some of our staff may have some expertise. You know, you can reach out to us and ask, you know, can somebody come do a training on X, or can somebody come do a training on Y? And if we have the staff that has the expertise to do that, we do that. So I'm going to go in a little bit. So those are sort of all of our overarching goals, and there's lots of different ways that we address all of those goals. So I'm going to get a little bit into how the structure of our agency is and how everything works. So essentially, you know, what you would expect from beginning to end, but everything comes initially through our intake. We have an intake unit. It's called intake and referral, but any call, any fax, any email, something from our website, any inquiry, will go to our intake unit first, and one of our intake specialists, you know, will speak to the person or the referrer, really get a sense of what the story is and what kind of assistance the person is looking for. And then either the intake specialist can help the person right on the spot, you know, depending what the issue is. If it's a matter of, you know, you just need some information, you just need to know, who do I go to for this, or how, you know, how can I address this issue? Our intake specialists are pretty good at giving referral information on the spot, and even giving some brief self-advocacy assistance on the spot. If it's something a little bit more complicated, that you know, is something that is within our goals, then it would get assigned and then start moving through that process, which I'll show you. But anything that kind of doesn't fall within our goals will at least get referral information. So really our goal with this is just that anybody who contacts us is not going to hear, sorry, we can't help you, goodbye. They're going to leave with something, even if it's just, you know, we can't help with this particular issue, but maybe, you know, this is something that we know legal services can help with, or something that Community Health Law Project can help with. We just don't like turning anybody away. We like at least giving something to everybody that comes to us for help. So if it is a rights violation matter, or a matter that is that requires legal advocacy, our intake unit will assign that out and to the managing attorneys of those teams. So our organization is divided, our advocacy piece is divided into issue teams. Those issue teams are employment, community-based services, and institutional rights. So the managing attorney of that team will assign it out to an attorney who will call the individual back, and then a decision is made about what is the scope of that legal representation going to be. And that usually happens between, you know, on the telephone between the person who needs assistance and the attorney that's assigned. And so there is a range of assistance that the attorneys will provide. A lot of it is counsel and self-advocacy assistance. A lot of it is really arming individuals with the tools that they need to be able to effectively advocate for themselves or advocate for their loved ones, or giving them, you know, a little bit of advice on, hey, this is who you write a letter to, and here, let me give you some suggested language. You know, that's a little bit more involved, and you know, or hey, we'll take a look at your IEP and see if it's you know, and see if there's any problems with it, or see if it reflects what it is that you're looking for. And then so that kind of falls in that limited legal advocacy. And then the extended legal advocacy, need to go to due process, need to go to mediation, need to, you know, go to a hearing for something. There's some accommodations or some assistive technology necessary. And that's really, you know, sort of the continuum of legal advocacy services that you could expect. So I've been talking a lot about the individual work we do. And a lot actually of what we do and what we're trying to move more towards is doing systemic work. So that really needs to be our focus because we're a small agency and we serve the whole state. We serve anybody in New Jersey and we serve all disabilities. So it's not just developmental disabilities, it's mental illness. As I said before, it's traumatic brain injury. So anybody with a disability lives in New Jersey. It's a lot of people, it's a lot of issues, and it's a lot to take on. So really where we can, you know, be most effective is in systemic work that's going to have the greatest benefit to the most people. So these are some examples of past work that we've done. We had a case involving involuntary medication in the psychiatric hospitals in the state and the way that the state was going about administering involuntary medication. We had an litigation around Olmstead and the waiting list, and Olmstead litigation really centered around individuals who wanted to leave developmental centers and live in the community, but because of lack of appropriate community services could not do so. It really dovetailed again also into the waiting list, which still exists, but not, you know, as it did 10, 15 years ago, but the waiting list for services was part of the settlement. And then there was a case involving students receiving educational services in the least restrictive environment. We do also amicus briefs for other legal firms or other cases that we have vested interest in. So now I'm going to talk about as I said, the protection piece, sort of the monitoring and investigation responsibilities of a protection and advocacy agency. So unlike our legal advocacy, where there is a clear client and an attorney and a client-attorney relationship, when we undertake an abuse and neglect investigation, we are not the attorneys. You are not a legal client for us. We are undertaking an investigation using our protection and advocacy authority. So as the protection and advocacy, we have been tasked with being able to do this, being able to investigate abuse and neglect. And there's a lot of things that we are able to do in order to proceed with investigations of abuse and neglect. So there is not an individual client in those cases, although it's very, very often, you know, an individual who's reached out to us to report the allegation. Sometimes it's not anyone that's reached out to us to report the allegation. Sometimes there's something in the news. Sometimes there's something, you know, an anonymous source has called to reach out. Sometimes it's a whistleblower that's contacted us. Any of those situations where we receive an allegation, regardless of the source where we receive the allegation, we can decide to undertake an investigation. So we can go, so I'm going to stick just with investigation first and explain. In an investigation, we can have access to staff, to the individuals, to anyone that we need to talk to in order to conduct the investigation. We have access to records. We are able to access records so that we can effectively conduct an investigation. That is different, a little bit different from monitoring. So monitoring doesn't necessarily mean that abuse and neglect exists. Maybe we don't have an allegation. Monitoring is really proactive kind of activity. We can decide for any number of reasons why we want to go into a particular setting. Generally, monitoring is just to observe conditions, to make sure that individuals in that setting are not experiencing abuse and neglect. and to make sure that individuals in that setting have information about us, about the protection and advocacy system, and how, you know, they can contact us and what kinds of services that we can provide for them. Monitoring is generally, you know, we go in and sort of regular business hours. There's some parameters. There's, you know, you can't really disrupt programming if programming is happening. So there's a little bit more parameters around the monitoring because it's, you know, it's more of an outreach kind of an activity. Whereas the investigation, there can't be any parameters on our access to individuals or to facilities if we are conducting an investigation. So hopefully that's clear. If it wasn't, people can certainly ask me questions. So here's the law, and here's actually the language around monitoring. Yeah, a couple points I didn't mention that are really important. Our access is unaccompanied, which means we can walk around the facility by ourselves. The CEO does not have to walk with us, does not have to have eyes on who we're talking to. They think they do sometimes, but, you know, just a little bit of education and we can explain, you know, that we are allowed to be unaccompanied. There again, normal working hours and visiting hours. So that's the little bit of parameters that are around the monitoring. And just making sure that individuals' rights are respected and that people are safe. And, you know, we're able to talk to anyone who wants to talk to us. I mean, we're not going to shove our face into anybody who's not interested in talking to us. That's not really effective. But we're there, we're present, and we're available to people. And why this is so important, specifically in institutional settings, is that typically, you know, individuals who live in those settings don't have as much access, might not have access to the phone to call us, might not even know that we exist or what we do. So by us being able to go out and be present in settings where individuals are, it really is that, just a presence, so that individuals who want to talk to us have the ability to approach us and talk to us. And here's, again, our investigations, and I pretty much covered most of that, except I didn't mention probable cause. So probable cause is the threshold for whether we have access in an investigation or not. So as I talked about, the access to residents, interviewing, access to the facilities, access to records is based on whether we have probable cause to suspect abuse and neglect. And courts have upheld that it is the protection and advocacy system who determines that there is probable cause. So we are the ones ourselves who can determine whether we have probable cause, not, you know, another court or the setting or the CEO or the, you know, provider agency. It is the protection and advocacy that determines the probable cause. And then this is the much broader sort of access that differs a little bit from the monitoring. See, there's sort of no limitations about normal business hours, normal visiting hours. Again, it's still unaccompanied access. So that's sort of the down and dirty of our investigations and monitoring. Again, they can also be systemic. So it's not only just individual abuse and neglect. If we feel that there is, you know, something systemic, a whole group home, or a whole cottage at a developmental center, or a whole unit at a psychiatric hospital, you know, we can undertake an investigation on behalf of that whole group and not necessarily just one person or one allegation. Okay, so I'm done with investigations and monitoring. So moving on to the rest of our services. You know, I talked about the monitoring investigation. I talked about our legal advocacy and our individual client representation. As a whole, we also do all of this outreach and training. We did a lot of town halls during COVID, and we're all still in a semi-virtual world, although sometimes things are going a little bit back in person. But for a long period of time there, I know all of there was no in-person anything. And really, we had to learn very, very fast that's what we did. We were in person. I mean, we were monitoring, we were in facilities, we were out, doing outreach events. How were we still going to be connected with the communities that needed our help or needed our services? So we quickly, figured out how to use Zoom and how to use these virtual platforms. And we did town halls. We started doing webinars. Those were some of the ways that I think we were effective at still connecting with the community and hearing what was happening when we weren't able to be out in places in person. All of our webinars, I should mention too, should be on our website. So we record, most of our educational webinars. We have a pretty robust page full of self-advocacy resources. So if you haven't perused our website and checked out a lot of the resources that we have on there, I would encourage you to do that, because there's a lot of really specific information that might be helpful if you are looking for assistance. And then piece I haven't talked about at all, which I'm going to talk about now, is our public policy. So we have a director of policy, and that director, like I do, works closely with all of the issue teams. So issues that are relevant to institutional rights or community-based services, our policy director will work with them on a variety of activities, like commenting on proposed legislation. We do a lot of collaboration with other stakeholders. We meet pretty regularly with Mental Health Coalition. We meet monthly with DDD. We meet regularly with the Juvenile Justice Commission and with the Department of Children and Families and the Children's System of Care. We meet with the Department of Health. I know I'm probably forgetting a zillion. I know we meet, bi-weekly with our DD Act partners, Quiz, the Developmental Disabilities Council, and the Bog Center. So we meet regularly to talk about our collaborations, to talk about work we do together, to make sure that we're all complementing each other in the services that we're offering to everybody. Some of the policy activities and probably should be, updated, but really, there was a lot to do during COVID. And actually, I think this is still ongoing, but the critical care resource allocation was a policy that came out of the state, and essentially was how, states had to decide if the hospitals got overrun and they started to run out of resources, started to run out of things like ventilators, how are they going to triage who got the ventilators? And so this was what they called it, the critical care resource allocation. And, not surprising, it was not a positive policy for individuals with disabilities. They got the short end of the stick as far as resource allocation. So we sent a letter to the governor, and we actually filed a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights, which I believe is still pending. Luckily, that really is no longer the issue, but the principle still remains. The deaths in nursing homes during COVID, that was something that did a lot of policy around the Department of Health about. And since then, there have been a number of bills enacted that has established a long-term care advisory board, and lots of activities that are still ongoing to address how poorly our nursing homes fared in taking care of our most vulnerable citizens during COVID. there was a lot of work around visitation and hospitals and other settings that were restricting visitation for families, for essential caregivers during COVID. So we did a lot of work with the governor and comments on policies, etc., really to get the essential caregiver exception to the visitation policy really during the height of COVID. And I think is still here and there a problem. We get a one-off call here and there that, you know, a hospital or a particular setting is just not allowing visitors. So we usually will help address that as it comes up. And, you know, not that, you know, COVID is all we did. We did lots of other policy activities since then. There was advocacy around the implementation of, and the bill, I'm sure somebody knows it, but it's going to escape me, the bill that allowed students who, you know, were supposed to graduate during that period when school was virtual and they weren't receiving any of their related services, to continue to get those services beyond the age of 21. I know somebody will put it in the chat what that bill was, but we were commenters on that and supporters of that bill and did a lot of collaborative work with other agencies on that. Just recently made comments on the statewide transition plan and the implementation of the home and community-based services settings rule. And then also made comments about the state's plan to use the American Rescue Plan funds. And that's certainly not an exhaustive list. It's just an example of the kind of policies that we would do work on, whether it's comments, whether it's collaborating with other stakeholders on advocacy. So that is it. I do want to say two quick things. So I wanted to make sure I left plenty of time for questions. Here's all our contact information. I believe Kyoko gave everybody the PowerPoint. If not, we can certainly share it. I'm happy to put my information, my email address in the chat. So I would ask if your question is really specific to your own personal sort of situation, something, you know, you don't really want to share with a big group. I am happy to try to respond if you want to email me privately. Wait, I'm going to stop the share now so we can all see each other. Email me privately so at my email, and as best as I can help you, I'm happy to help you. So for other general questions that, you know, would help everybody, I am happy to take them.
Jill, I see one question in the Q&A. Someone, Jennifer asked, are these services county-based? And I think she put it in when you were talking about the specific services right before the monitoring.
Right.
Okay.
We're not county-based. We are one agency. We're based in Trenton, although we're kind of hybrid. We're in the office, I think, like many are, but we cover the whole state. So it's not about specific resources in specific counties for us, at least the services that we provide.
Jill, for those people that aren't familiar with it, could you just, in a short paragraph, tell them what Olmsted is? Because I don't think a lot of people know what it is.
So Olmsted was a Supreme Court case that had to do with two women in Georgia, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna quiz me now too. But snapshot. Two women, I think they were in Georgia, and I believe they were in some facility-based setting, and I can't remember if it was for mental illness or developmental disabilities, but essentially they wanted to leave that congregate setting and live in their own apartment in the community. And the state just didn't have the capacity or the ability to serve them. And so the case really centered around what is the state's responsibility to provide community-based services for individuals who wanted and could benefit from it. And so really that it was the case. Olmsted is really it is the biggest sort of case that most of the protection and advocacies lean on to force states to expand their home and community-based services so that individuals who want to live in the community don't have to wait years and years and years and years and can't access the services that they need in order to be successful in the community, just like everybody else. So really,
can I add a little bit more to that?
Yeah.
Okay. No problem. Yes, it was a United States Supreme Court case. It was decided in 1999.
Thank you.
There was two women in a Georgia psychiatric facility.
Okay.
They both had mental health support needs, but they also both had intellectual and developmental disabilities. But they were in a psychiatric facility, and their case went through, went through Georgia and got all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote the decision, Olmsted, the name Olmsted, everyone always wonders where that came from. So the name of the gentleman who led the Georgia Department of Human Services, his name was Tommy Olmsted. So he became, he was the one that was being sued. And the decision did just that. It allowed people, it said that your state can't deny you, even though these two women were, it was decided by their support team. Yeah, they can live in the community. Georgia said we don't have the support. So the Supreme Court decision said that's not a reason, and you have to provide supports. And it also required all 50 states to come up with a plan to move people who wanted to leave institutions. It required all 50 states to come up with a plan, and unfortunately, our state, New Jersey, was slow in developing a plan, did not develop a plan until 2007, until they were forced to. And that plan, then became in place, and people who wanted to move out of our institutions started moving. So at the time, the Olmsted decision came down from the Supreme Court. We had 7 institutions, 2 closed, 1 in 2014, 1 in 2015, but we still here in New Jersey have 5 institutions for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. People are still moving out, but people are still moving in. It is unfortunate, but yeah, so that's what Olmsted is all about.
Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Yeah, and I think, that's the key piece, and that's the thing it really centers around, is the state's obligation to have a robust enough service system in the community to serve anyone who wants to live in the community regardless of their need.
Right. And New Jersey, that path to progress, it was a 10-year, it took 10 years. So the people that wanted to get out, that should have moved out, have been moved out. The name of New Jersey's plan was called the Path to Progress. I work for the Community Living Education Project through the School of Public Health at Rutgers, and we were part of that Path to Progress. And myself and 3 others of us on Council 6 worked at CLEP. One of the women is retired, but there are 3 of us still on the CLEP team who have worked. We worked with Disability Rights New Jersey, and we have worked with the the state to help people decide where they wanted to go, and gave them information and referrals on how to leave the institutions. And we've moved many people out.
It was really, really fantastic work. Yes.
It was
everything that you
very
did.
challenging work, but it was something that I certainly am always going to carry with me. Remember the many wonderful families and people that I met that were so happy to leave when they never thought that they would ever.
Good.
So good work, good trouble,
Yeah. Well,
good
that's what we're
trouble,
all here for, right? To stir up
Yeah.
a little trouble.
good
That's
trouble.
how you get things done.
Are there, excuse me, are there any other questions for Jill? No?
Well, as I said, I will throw my my email here in the chat, and if anyone needs to reach out to me or wants to contact me offline, you can feel free. But thanks so much for listening to me and sticking with me through this, through this.
Jill, thank you so much. Very much appreciate. Glad we were able to do this. I know we had tried to do it in October, couldn't do it, but we were able to get you here for November, and we're very grateful. Thank you so much. It was
Thank you
wonderful.
so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Wonderful presentation. Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, excuse me. Let me tell you a little bit about the Regional Family Support Planning Councils, which are the organization that is hosting this forum. Back in the early 90s, there was a white paper written to basically support families and people with intellectual disabilities. It was supported in the Senate by Senator DeFrancesco, and in the Assembly by Assemblywoman Ogden. What happened from that was that families got together, and based upon their support of the Family Support Act, in early 1993, the Family Support Act was signed by Governor Florio. And what it basically does is it establishes family support planning councils, which are made up of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their family members, to provide access to information and to give feedback to, at that time, the Division of Developmental Disabilities, and now in addition to that, the Division of Children and Families. One of the things that I like to promote is the fact that we have access. When there are issues, we can talk to the department heads. We can get responses and directions and information that might take a lot longer for someone else. We are not a support group. Our role is not to, we try to support people, but our role is to provide information to the division and to children and families, and for us to take that information back to our families and disseminate the information. There are 10 family support councils. Ours is Council 6, which makes up Monmouth and Ocean counties. And our job has been and continues to be to advocate for people with disabilities. All of us have family members who have disabilities, and we've been very successful at advocating and getting change in a system that is hard to change. That being said, we meet every second Thursday of the month, and we're doing it virtually via Zoom. If anyone would like to attend our meetings, the meetings are open to the public. It's not a closed session. And you can email me, and I'll give you my email address now because it's very simple. and then I'll post it on chat in a little while. It's mbrill@att.net. So you should have no trouble contacting me. At 7:30, we're expecting Kim Murray, who is the Director of Special Education at the Department of Education, to be on. Kim had a previous engagement earlier. And right now, I'd like to ask anybody who's on if there are any questions or anything that we can talk about for the brief time until Kim comes on. Oh, I take it that we don't, so we'll take a brief break and Kim will be on at 7:30. Okay, forget the break, folks. I'd like to introduce Kim Murray. She is the Director of Special Education at the New Jersey Department of Education. And I will let her take the floor, and Kim, it's all yours.
Sure, great. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm sorry I'm late. I'm going back to school, so Thursday night is class night, and we just got finished. So I wanted to share with you a little bit about the work we do around secondary transition. That's what I understand our topic is. If I'm totally off task and off track, let me know. I do have a slide presentation that I'd like to share, really brief. And then we have time for your questions and comments. So, Kyoko, do you think you can let me? Oh, here we go. I can share screen. Okay. Let's see. Let's see, I want to share that.
Okay, we can see it.
We're good? Okay. Excellent. Let me just move this over so I can see my notes. Okay. So again, thank you for inviting me to your forum. Kim Murray, and I am the Director of the Office of Special Ed at the New Jersey Department of Education. I'm fairly new to the role. I have been the director of the office only since January of last year, but I've been with the department for nearly 15 years. And then I was a special ed teacher for almost another 15 years. So I've been around for a long time. If you ask me what I do, I generally say that I'm a special education teacher because that is some of the most important work that I have done in my career. And I really think that sort of informs my views. It's the lens at what I look at almost everything we do as how is this impacting students? How would this impact me as a teacher? So I think it's just a really great foundation that I lean on. The agenda I have is short and sweet. I'd like to share a little bit about the Office of Special Education with you, provide some information and resources around secondary transition, and then try my best to answer some of your questions. So let's just go a little bit about the Office of Special Education. So we are comprised of 50 staff members when we are fully staffed. It's always difficult onboarding folks, but we're getting there. And we work mostly out of Trenton, but also at the Learning Resource Centers across the state. We have a Learning Resource Center in East Orange, we have one in Trenton, and then we have one down in at Rowan University. And those are open to parents and educators. We are, let's see, we are tasked with supporting over 220,000 students with disabilities, educated in more than 650 school districts. And we are responsible for ensuring compliance with state and federal regulations, as well as supporting program and educator growth and providing guidance and information to parents, educators, and really the larger education community. So when I was invited to join tonight's discussion, transition was the topic of interest. And I've been spending a lot of time thinking about our students, right? And what happens when they leave school. And it's interesting because I've recently made a new friend in my neighborhood named Joe. And I don't know what kind of services Joe received when he was in school or what type of program he was in when he was in school. What I do know is that he's a really nice kid, and he graduated last year when my son graduated. We started to connect when I was out walking the dog and he's taking a walk. And so we've just built up this really nice relationship. And what I've learned is that he's not going to school or working. And our conversations sort of center around that he's bored, that his weekends are no different than his weekdays. He's at home when he should be having a much more meaningful post-secondary experience. So that led me to, let's take a look at the data. What's happening after students are leaving school? And so this data that I'm presenting is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the US Department of Labor. And what it shows us is that there's some room for growth and some work to do when it comes to people with disabilities obtaining employment. In 2021, just 19.1% of people with a disability were employed, compared to 63.7% of people with no disability. And on the right, you can see the graph that shows some longitudinal data from 2009 to 2021. The top line are folks without a disability, and the blue line to the bottom are showing folks with a disability. And you can see that it's pretty static. There hasn't been a lot of up or down change over the last decade. So what do we do? What can we do to support students before they are launched out into the world and after age 21? So I thought I would share with you some of the universal ways that we are supporting students and families and educators around transition, with the hope of improving what we do that will therefore or then lead to some strong transition planning in school and better outcomes for students after school. First, let's start with the people. We have 2 professional staff members who focus solely on our 14 to 21-year-old students. First is Bill Freeman. Bill is our transition coordinator and is regarded as an expert in this area. He knows everything about the regulatory compliance and the requirements around transition planning, but just as important, Bill has so much knowledge about improving programs and services for students. He is a wealth of knowledge, and we're so lucky to have him. And then Joanne Johnson is our transition specialist, and she just came to us in September. And what's great about Joanne is she came to us from a school district where she was a child study team member for part of her time there. And she was also a teacher in the 18 to 21-year-old transition program. So she can really bring to us knowledge, practical knowledge about what it looks like as the child study team member, helping to create IEPs and support teachers, as well as the teacher implementing those IEPs and supporting students. So she's such a valuable resource, and we're really going to rely on that knowledge as we build out more training and resources for the field. In August, we launched our new website, and it's great. It's pretty great. It's been a long time coming. We've been working on it for a really long time, and a lot of thought was given to making that site as user-friendly as possible and as packed with information as we could get. Part of that is this New Jersey Transition Toolkit, which we launched in September. And it's a page of the website devoted entirely to supporting our students ages 14 to 21. Each of the broad topics that you see on this slide is actually an accordion. So if you click on that, it will open a drop down of tons of resources and training and links to other agencies. Some highlights include an FAQ section about transition, links to state and federal agencies, and then that third section, planning for post-secondary education, that has just about everything you can think of for planning for post-secondary life. So I would encourage, people to go here, visit, see what we have, tell us what we need, but it's a really great resource. The information is updated regularly, and we hope to add some more interactive pieces in the coming months, and solicit feedback from the field as to what we need. If there are any gaps, how can we make it even better? On our website, you can also find the model IEP. An interactive version is underway. We're in the final testing stage of that. And the interactive IEP will provide areas, links, pop-ups for things to consider, discussion points for the IEP team for each step in the IEP process, including the transition requirements. That is coming, I hope, before the end of the year. And for now, we just have the updated IEP document on the website for you to take a look at. And when we're talking about transition, we need to remember that in New Jersey, our special education regulations require the IEP teams to consider transition planning at age 14 or younger, if that's appropriate. So beginning no later than age 14, the IEP team must begin to invite the student to any IEP meeting where transition to adult life will be discussed. The IEP needs to have a statement of the student's strengths, interests, and preferences. There also needs to be, at age 14, identification of a course of study and related strategies and activities that link back to the student's strengths, interests, and preferences, right? What do they do well? What do they want to do? What are they interested in, right? How can we link that to a course of study? What activities do we need to have? And those activities are intended to assist the student in developing or attaining their post-secondary goals related to training, education, employment, and, when appropriate, independent living. Continued at age 14, you must have consideration of consultation from other agencies. Agencies such as the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Services. Do we need to bring in DVRS as we're talking about transition and post-secondary outcomes for this student? The IEP needs to have consideration of interagency linkages and responsibilities. right? What agencies are likely to support this student in the future? What do we need to get? What supports do we need to sort of weave together to support this student to successful outcomes? It could be DVRS, it could be community organizations, maybe the family needs to be connected or the student with Social Security. Maybe we need to start exploring college programs and bring them into the conversation. So this is an opportunity to really think about what the student needs to be successful. And this last one is fairly new for us, and that is to consider the need for pre-employment transition services. And we will talk a little bit more about this on the next slide. So one of the new sections to the model IEP, and this is just a quick clip of that, is the pre-employment transition services, or pre-ET section. So the federal law, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, requires states to provide 5 core services to youth in schools between the ages of 14 to 21, as well as youth out of school between the ages of 14 and 24. And those 5 transition services are job exploration counseling, work-based learning experiences, counseling about opportunities for enrollment in programs at institutions of higher education, workplace readiness training to develop social skills and independent living skills, and then some instruction in self-advocacy. The provision of these services are a shared responsibility between the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation and the local school districts. So these are things that we should be doing, that districts should be doing in the conversations around the IEP transition requirements. But we've added this pre-ET section to the model IEP to bring more attention to this requirement and make sure that the teams are talking about all parts of transition planning. Additional requirements kick in at age 16. But again, IEP teams may consider these requirements for students younger than 16 if appropriate. So these requirements include the administration of an age-appropriate transition assessment, the development of measurable post-secondary goals related to training, education, employment, and if applicable, independent living, right? As well as the courses of study needed to assist the student in reaching those goals. And also, we want to see the IEP. The IEP must name the person responsible to serve as the post-secondary liaison, who's going to sort of coordinate the effort and the linkages. Beyond the IEP requirements, which are important, the regulations are the foundation, and that's where we build off things in the IEP. But our office also partners with transition experts to support post-secondary work and outcomes. One program is community-based instruction, or CBI. This is a partnership with the Boggs Center and focuses on building capacity across the state in providing quality community-based instruction. The training opportunities are available for families and school personnel. The training opportunities are ongoing. There's different levels, different access of training, depending how deep you want to dive into it. And the training is provided at no cost for those that are participating. And the second program I wanted to share is person-centered planning. And this program aims to promote using person-centered approaches to ensure that the correct and effective supports are available to students to achieve positive outcomes when their 18 to 21-year-olds programs are ending. And this program provides training, coaching, and online resources. And again, our website has all the information, all the contacts, all the links, even some resources that you can get right from the website. It's a great program that we would love to see expanded because it really does put the student, shines a light right on the student. The student is in charge. It's a great thing. And we would love to see that move, spread and build capacity around that. And so next we'll move on to your discussion, your questions, your comments. And here is my contact information. I have a sheet I will give to Kyoko that has links with all of the websites I've talked about, all the different pieces of our website, as well as Bill and Joanne's contact information, and our special education ombudsman, our phone number. If you need to get in touch with us, with me, I'm happy to answer whatever questions I can. Okay.
Kim, as we're waiting for questions to come in, I'd like to thank you. We've never met, Ann Martinelli. I'm one of the vice chairs for Council 6. So thank you for coming here and speaking to us tonight. But I'd like to thank you for pointing out person-centered planning. That is key to anyone. It's key to everyone's life. Let me just put it that way. You know, I've worked with person-centered planning for almost 20 years now in the adult system, have seen firsthand, not only with my own son, but with so many other people, how it has changed lives. And to see it coming into the education system, it can only build, you know, once you get into the adult system. If you're introduced to it in the education system, it's going to help you. And for anyone who is for hearing that term person-centered planning for the first time, I really urge you to look at whatever documents Kim is going to be sending to Kyoko, who will then send it out to all participants. But I would really, you know, urge anyone to learn as much as you can about person-centered planning and thinking. It's key. It's key to all of our lives. It's just for me, it's one of the most important things that can be done with education, transition planning, planning for adult services and supports. It's really, really important. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree. It's so powerful. It has the potential to be so powerful.
Yep.
And it's Michael Steinbruck.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
He is amazing. And when he talks about what potential it has and what it can do for kids, it's just, I could listen to him all day long talk about this and show us how to do it the right way. So yeah, he's great. Let me see. I know there was a spreadsheet.
Yeah, I know. I saw Kyoko put it into the chat. So
and I started to take a look, and I pulled together some responses because I don't know if off the cuff is one of my areas of strength. So, but I will try my best. So one of the first questions was about hiring case managers by the state, whether case managers should be state level employees. And the quick answer to that is no. And let me tell you why. One, state special ed regulations require each school to employ child study team members in sufficient numbers. And that's intentional because we want the child study teams, the case managers, to be part of the school community, to not be someone who comes in just to do a job and then they leave. We want them to be there, part of the school, to know the students, to know the programs, to know the teachers, to know the ins and outs so that they can advocate for their students and create strong IEPs and be part of that school community. Right, the case managers or CST members, they're not supervisors, they're not making hiring decisions. They are there, a very clearly defined job responsibilities around assessments, evaluations, and case management. And because New Jersey operates under local control, districts are responsible for providing those education and related services. So I think even logistics, I can't even imagine what that would look like, trying to bring all of those case managers under state employees. But CSTs can be very effective in the school district, where they can build those relationships with staff, students, and families.
Kim, I think the concern, and I've heard it, from other families, is that they're at the discretion of the superintendent or the principal. They want to maintain their job, and they are not always the most, I'm trying to think of the right word. Sometimes they might feel the pressure to, for example, I know you've probably heard this one before, speech therapy. Their child's entitled to speech therapy 3 times a week for 1 hour. And they may short circuit that and say, well, we're giving them speech 1 hour a week. We can't do any more than that. When the reality is, if they can't provide it in the school district, they're supposed to provide it from an outside source. But speech therapists are hard to come by. They're expensive, and the populations are larger. What does a case manager do without feeling that kind of pressure from the principal, superintendent? Because it's happened. I at one point worked for SPAN, and I've heard this, in meetings. Well, we can't do more than give you the 1 hour. And then all of a sudden, when you start mentioning, well, you're responsible, or this is your requirement, suddenly they find a way to do the extra couple of hours.
Right. Well, I mean, I think I think you answered it, right? The parents are members of the IEP team. They have input into what's happening, and we need to make sure that everyone is informed as to what's happening. What's an effective IEP meeting look like? How are we empowering parents to bring their expertise to that IEP meeting? How are we having effective and meaningful and respectful conversations around what a student needs to progress? And hopefully those thoughts about how many speech therapists we have shouldn't be entering into those conversations. That's something we will figure out after we decide what's appropriate for the student. And as you said, with a little bit of conversation around, well, this is what they need, this is what you're responsible for, things you can come to an agreement, you can come to consensus. And when you don't, we have the resources to support that, right? We have a special ed ombudsman who is great at providing information. She's great at reaching out to districts. We have dispute resolution processes if the teams, can't come to a decision. I hate for it to get to that, but those are that's the reality, right? We have those mechanisms to support parents.
Yeah, but I think it's in some cases, parents are intimidated. If I ask for too much, what are they going to do? Are they going to give my son, daughter, are they going to take it out? They won't take it out on me. They'll take it out on my son or daughter. Or the parent isn't as educated as they should be for a variety of reasons. They're both working. They haven't had time to figure out what the process and what the system is. And they get limited information from the IEP team or the support team, because the more information they have, the more dangerous the parent becomes. they'll start asking for the things they deserve. I was amazed at one meeting I went to where the school district literally said, yes, we'll do all these things that you asked for. And I had never been to a meeting before where the school district said they were going to do everything that the parent was looking for their child. Because typically it's, well, we can't do that because we don't have the resource. We can't do this. Well, you're required to provide it. What are you going to do about that? Well, we'll get back to you after we talk to, So again, I understand what your position is, but understand the reality of the situation sometimes, that these IEP meetings are not necessarily as interactive as they should be.
I don't doubt that at all, right? And I think that's where we have room. I'm a big believer that the vast majority of people go into special education to support kids with disabilities and teach them, right? They want everyone to do well. I'm also a big believer in training and getting better and professional development. And, those are things that we can work on as a team, right? How do we have more effective IEP meetings? How do we improve communication between parents and case managers, especially when things are tense, right? That's not necessarily something we are taught in pre-service. When I was a teacher, I didn't have a class. When I was in college, nobody taught me how to diffuse a difficult situation, right? I knew my methods. I knew how to support kids. I knew how to teach. That piece, that we can do better, right? So where I see a need, I think we can always improve it with training.
Okay, I don't want to belabor the point.
I get it. Okay. The second question I have is, what government agency oversees private special education schools and their compliance with the IEP when the local district has arranged the placement? So that's the school district's responsibility. Under the special education regulations, when a school district places a student in an out-of-district placement, the out-of-district placement essentially becomes an extension of the school district. The school district is responsible for making sure the IEP is being implemented. Actually, before a student is even enrolled in an out-of-district placement, the school district has an obligation to ensure that the IEP can be fully implemented. And the district is also responsible for maintaining communication with the private school. If there becomes an issue where services are not being provided, and say a parent filed for a complaint investigation, the responsibility would lie with both the out-of-district placement for not implementing the IEP, as well as the school district for not ensuring that the IEP was being implemented. And so we at the department in the Office of Special Education, we monitor the approved private schools the same way we monitor, not exactly the same, but as we monitor the districts, we also monitor the private schools. Let's see. There was a question about motivating a student who has graduated to continue education, I guess go on for some post-secondary training. My suggestion would be to start with the transition section of the last IEP, right? What are the interests and preferences that he or she talked about for their post-secondary aspirations, right? What sort of things were they interested in? What sort of education did they consider, right? And start there. I think it's a great place to have a conversation around what is it that you think you want to do? What can we go look at? What tour different programs, right? Go to the different colleges, go to the different training programs to try to get him involved with learning more about them. Again, with an 18-year-old, I don't think it's super easy to get them to do anything they don't want to do, but that would be my suggestion, is really start with what they want, what they like, and build off of that. Question 4, how to make teens more social and involved in activities. And then why is their behavior different at school and different at home? Well, let's see. I really can't speak to a specific situation, but I can say that generally expectations are different in our different environments. I know that the Kim Murray that shows up at work is very different than the Kim Murray when she's home with her husband and the 5 cats and the dog. Right? We kind of behave in a different way depending on the setting. And that's no different for our kids, right? They know they have different expectations, different rules, different levels of comfort, and they'll behave differently. So it makes sense, right, that they act different in different settings. As for making teens more social, I think that that's harder. I have 2 sons in college. My older son has maintained the same group of friends since probably 4th grade. And I don't believe for his entire elementary through high school, even into college career, that he didn't spend every weekend with those friends. Very social, involved with school activities. My youngest son, who is now a college freshman, would choose video games in the basement every day of the week than interacting with another person, right? That's just personal preference. It's who we are. I think where it becomes an issue is when a student wants to be involved, but doesn't know how, right? If that's the case, my suggestion first would be reach out to the teacher, right? Or the guidance counselor or case manager and say, hey, my kid really wants to try this. They don't know how. Maybe it's as simple as an introduction to the advisor or another student who can kind of help facilitate that. Or if it's a larger issue or more complex, right? Maybe it needs to become a goal in the IEP on how to access these activities. Maybe it's something they could work up to. So I think, a great place to start would be with the student, have a conversation. What do you want to do? How can I help you do that? And then reach out to the school. How can they help you to get where they need to go? I'm sorry, but I don't have an answer for the direct support line. I was hoping maybe that was Jill. If she knew what that was, I'm not sure what that is. So I apologize. And then I think the last question is about COVID funding to address learning gaps. And that's a great question. And we definitely are. Between the ESSER funds, the Elementary and Secondary Relief Fund, which are called ESSER 2, New Jersey received about $1.2 billion in ESSER 2. That was back in December of 2020. And the bulk of those funds were provided directly to school districts to address learning gaps with a particular focus on learning acceleration and mental health supports. Then there was a second round of funding, the ARP-ESSER, the American Rescue Plan, Elementary and Secondary Schools, Emergency Relief, so ARP-ESSER. That was in August of 21, and that was $2.7 billion awarded to New Jersey to address learning loss. The majority of those funds, there's a small amount that could be maintained by states. The majority were given directly to school districts to address learning loss. In addition, if you go to the New Jersey Department of Ed website, you will see there's pages dedicated to learning loss and learning acceleration, right? We know that the gaps that have persisted for some of our underserved student groups grew larger during COVID and the remote instruction and the hybrid instruction. And so a lot of intention is behind finding the best ways to address those learning gaps and get students where they need to be. I think that's it for the questions that I knew ahead of time. I don't know if there are any others.
See anything?
There's some in the Q&A box.
Okay. Oh, Q&A. Gosh, thank you, Kyoko. So many buttons. Let's see. How can we work with the child? Kathy, I think that's a great question. How can we work with the child study teams to include person-centered planning in the IEP? I mean, I think that's, again, it's a conversation. We're trying to encourage school districts to participate, to get the training so they know what it is and they're not intimidated by a new process. But I think it's great. I don't know, where did that go? To kind of open the conversation with the case manager, with the director, and say, this is something I'd like to do. How do we do it? And how can we do it well? And I'm not, I don't know charting the life course, but it sounds super interesting and something I would like to learn more about.
I'll just give you a little bit there, Kim. The Charting the Life course is something that the Regional Family Support Planning Councils have been using with the Bog Center, the DD Council. I believe it's from the University of Kansas. It's a tool. There's a whole set of tools. A trajectory, a life trajectory, an integrated support star. There are a number of one-page tools that are, okay, I see Kyoko just put it in for everyone to see, but you can take a look at them. Yeah, it's something that's been going on for a few years, and we've been trying to really integrate it in with families, and it's excellent tools to use in IEP meetings.
Great. Okay, nice.
Take a look.
Thank
Take
you.
a look at them. You're welcome.
Definitely will. Okay, so Noreen, in transition programs 18 to 21, what do the schools have to provide so that students that are higher functioning? So the requirements are the same, right? You need to consider there needs to be, if a student is a student with a disability, there needs to be a transition assessment. There needs to be a statement of interest and preferences that are addressing that student's post-secondary goals. If that is college or some post-secondary education, so then the goals and the courses of study and the supports should be focusing on that goal. So now you're talking about, if we're talking about interagency linkages, so maybe that would be with exploring college programs, exploring, sort of the advocacy that comes with what happens when you go to college and you no longer have an IEP and you are now advocating for yourself, right? So those kinds of skills. It's not only life skills and job sampling. It really is, it should be individualized to what the student needs to achieve his or her post-school outcomes, whatever they may be. Oh, and then Kathy, how can we promote stronger collaboration between CSOC and the DOE to address the students' transition needs? I think that is probably the million-dollar question, right? I think with Walt, way back, I think you and I were on the council and the Council for Developmental Disabilities together years ago, and we were talking about CSOC and creating those connections. It's something that I think, interagency conversations, identifying priority areas definitely could strengthen the connections between the two. But it's not an easy answer, and I don't have one that's going to fix it. So school-based services. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by centralized services. A lot of school districts do try to keep their supports in the school building. Maybe in larger districts, they have staff members who are servicing more than one building. But right, the more local we are, the more that the staff members can build relationships with the students, I think the better off things are for everyone, because I think most of this starts with a relationship with the school personnel, a relationship with the student, a relationship with the family. And what's the best way to do that? You know, local might be a good way to keep that to the core of what's happening. So thanks, Julia, for the clarification. I can't speak to what DCF is doing. I can really only speak to what would be IEP requirements. I'm sorry, I don't have any more information to share on that.
I thought I saw two. Oh, that's not there. Okay. All right. It doesn't seem to be any more questions. Kim, thank you for your time. We really appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thank you for inviting me. You know, we can, you know, we are happy to help however we can. If not me, somebody from my staff, I'm sure would love to come and share their expertise.
Sounds good.
Kim,
And if you have something?
Kim, thank you very much for joining our Council 6 forum this evening. Really appreciate it. And hope to see you again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Everybody have a great night. Take
Thanks.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.